Hey, how you doing? I'm McCarthy Coyle, and I guess I'm the chief news junkie. Um, Looking at the New York Times, I try and get that every day because sometimes I read, more important things about Montana in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal than I do in the local press. So I really count on the national press for a lot of substantial information. And it's an irony that you have to race in. I'm at home here in Missoula with my co-producers, co-news junkies, and I have to race down. There's only 15 copies of the New York Times, the national newspaper that comes into Montana every day. The daily New York Times or the daily Washington Post or any daily big city newspaper doesn't arrive in Helena at all. So I think that there's an awful lot of people, including people in the legislature, whose national perspective and how Montana fits into the national picture is weakened. Their understanding is weakened because they don't get much print information. They have to rely on national television news for what's going on in Montana. Now, some of you, I know, probably have seen the schedule and have seen me doing this Thursday night slot, and it's referred to in the schedule as Under the Copper Dome, referring to the state legislature with its massive copper dome. And I am getting up there about once a week trying to check in and see what's going on. In this case, I raced up there Monday because last Saturday I saw a very brief story in the Missoulian, in which it talked about the fact that, the governor was about to make a new appointment to the Board of Regents. And the only peculiar thing, the very peculiar thing about the story is that it said that the list of candidates for the regent's position had been narrowed from what had been 7 candidates to 4 candidates. The problem is that none of them were named. And I went down to the Missoulian last Saturday and I said, well, who are these people? And no one really knew. And so I said, well, this is like, the regents is a major appointment. They're administering a system worth a couple of $1 billion, hundreds of millions of dollars in budgets, in policy matters. They're in a fierce legal dispute with the State Lands Board, in a case going before the Montana Supreme Court. This is a major constitutional appointment, and we don't even know who's going to be considered. So I went up to Helena on Monday, went immediately to the State Capitol building, and started checking around to see if I could find out what's going on. And bear in mind, it is true, news reporters talking about the people who are going to work on a daily basis in this state have a very difficult time getting information, because this state of Montana, like other states, does not like to give information out if it can help it. In any event, I got directed to the lieutenant governor's office, where I met a young man who was in charge of appointments and boards and things like that. And I said, hi, I introduced myself, and I said, I'd like to get the names of the 4 candidates for the Board of Regents. And the young man said, well, I can't really give those out. And I said, hold it right there, please, and I'll be back. And so I went back up the hallway to the governor's office, and I was in the outside area, the lobby, and I didn't know if I'd be able to see the governor, but I was determined to get those names. And fortunately, the governor, I guess, overheard my expressing consternation. I do express consternation when I'm trying to get some information that I'm entitled to and that you're entitled to. And I just said to the governor, as he shook my hand, because we've met before, and he shook my hand, and I didn't let go of his hand, and I said, Governor, I said, I need the names of the 4 finalists for the regent's position, and I understand they're down in the lieutenant governor's office. Perhaps you would escort me down there and we can get them because it's required under open meeting and freedom of information laws in the state of Montana. So the governor, Mark Roscoe, as gracious as he customarily is, did walk me down there. He knew that I had the law on my side, and we walked down the corridor and back to the young man's office, and the young man said, "Well, when you said you were coming back," he said, "I didn't know you were going to bring my boss." So we got the names. And before we go into these four names of the regents, I would like to point out that the governor is set to interview these four people this Saturday, which makes it the 15th of February. And I have been in contact with both the governor and with Associated Press, the Great Falls Tribune, and the Missoulian, suggesting that these meetings, these interviews, should be open to the public under Montana's open meeting law. Now, I haven't heard back from the governor on that, but let's go to give you a sense of who's... What's shocking to me is that I was informed by the governor's staff that there was a total of seven applications for the Board of Regents, right? Now, I'm just shocked by this in the sense that we're talking about this quadrant of western Montana from the Flathead on down to Ravalli. I mean, what was the process of soliciting applications and names of people who would be interested in serving on the Board of Regents? I don't think that anybody really beat the bushes, including the governor or any of his staff, if all they wound up with were 7 applicants. Because there's certainly, I know more than 7 people that are qualified for that board who didn't know there was an appointment coming up. So what's the process of soliciting recruits? As they wind up with 7? And they discard 3. We don't know who the 3 discards are. We don't know if there were any, like Native American educators or Native American leaders from up the valley that were even considered. But we did get, so we wound up with 4. The governor wound up with 4 applicants, or 4 finalists. One is Jeanette McKee, a Republican former legislator from out Hamilton Way, and Jeanette is the only one who wrote a kind of a considered personal and professional letter to the governor expressing her interest in replacing Kermit Schwanke on the Board of Regents. I'm going to read quickly because we've got a lot of material to cover here, so please be patient, and you're going to have to throw in some focus here. So Jeanette McKee wrote to the governor, "Dear Mark, as we look to this year and beyond, funding Montana higher education will become increasingly difficult and challenging and will require, I believe, moving from risk avoidance to the risk-taking mode. Higher education is likely to be squeezed by dwindling federal support, increasing state commitments, and enrollment pressures. The status quo is not an option. Education, which once had to change to meet the challenges of the Industrial Revolution, must now face a new challenge, preparing workers for the knowledge age. The Montana University system must, I believe, rethink itself. It should identify the activities that are productive, that should be strengthened, promoted, and expanded. Some of the questions all units must be confronted with are, what is your mission? Is it still the right mission? Is it still worth doing? If we were not already doing this, would we now go into it? Instead of ranking programs and activities according to their good intentions, rethinking could rank them according to results." This is Jeanette McKee. "As a former legislator, I believe that higher education must understand and address the negative aspects of its image, even if the perceptions of legislators or the general public are untrue. Nothing is more important than for the Board of Regents and the university hierarchy to listen to their audience, supporters, and critics, and to talk to them in terms easily understood." I hardly ever know, I'm speaking for myself, I hardly ever know when the Board of Regents is meeting. Why isn't the Board of Regents meetings carried on public radio and public television? This is important. This is a very important board. If selected, McKee goes on, I commit to you to spend the time necessary to come to board meetings fully prepared. The skills and values I would bring to this process include problem-solving skills, honesty, independent thinking, sense of humor, visionary ideas, trustworthiness, practicality, integrity, compassion, and courage, and so forth. It is an exciting time for education in Montana, and all the players should be involved. The governor, legislators, higher education folks, K through 12, faculty, students, the business community, to create a vision for the institutions that will allow them to move forward. It would be an honor and a serious responsibility to serve you and the people of Montana as a member of the Board of Regents. She includes, a brief resume, which has, as all of the four finalists do, some interesting assignments. And in the interest of time, if we can, I can come back to that. But let's move on to what some of the other applicants had to say about themselves. Here we have Ernest Ratzberg from Polson, Montana. He's a pharmacy manager at the Pomida Discount Store in Polson. He has a BS in pharmacy from the University of Montana. He's been served on the advisory board of the School of Fine Arts at the U of M, and as well to the School of Business at the University of Montana. And Ernie Ratzberg, that's R-A-T-Z-B-U-R-G, writes, to whom it may concern, as a product of all levels of Montana education, I greatly respect the educational system in the state. I've always taken an avid interest in the university system, would appreciate an opportunity to contribute to the system that has given so much to me. My wife's educational experience of 32 years teaching at the elementary level has given me insight into that aspect of education. The high standards of education in Montana prepares students well, gives them the freedom to explore and apply their abilities. I am acquainted somewhat with most units of the higher educational system within our state. My mother is a graduate of Western Montana College. My mother-in-law from Eastern Montana College. My son, cousins, nieces, and nephews attended or graduated from MSU and Northern. My daughter will graduate from the U of M this spring. As a member of the Board of Regents, I will listen well, prepare myself, make educated decisions regarding all issues presented. I consider it an honor to have been nominated and would consider it a privilege to serve. Thank you for listening and watching on Missoula Community Access Television. Another of the four finalists is Arlene Broom. She lives on Meadowwood Lane in Missoula. She gives her resume and, again, has some... all of these people are Republicans because, as the governor informed me, he can't overbalance the Board of Regents according to the law. You can't have an excess of Democrats or an excess of Republicans. He doesn't have to appoint a Republican. He could appoint, in this case, a Republican and an independent, a libertarian, or whatever. He just can't, according to the governor, appoint a Democrat because it would throw the partisan balance on the Board of Regents out of kilter. So Arlene Broom writes to the governor, Dear Mark, greetings, best wishes for 97. I am writing to let you know that I am very interested in the position on the Board of Regents that will be open in February. My background with the university and the university system has been extensive and varied. 8 years on the local executive board, 8 years on the President's Council, plus various committees, search and contacts with community concerns both inside and outside the system. I have the time, energy, and desire to serve in this capacity, plus the knowledge to work towards the best decisions for the university system in the state of Montana. Many people have voiced their interest and willingness to support me. I would appreciate your consideration and thoughts towards me. Sincerely, Arlene Broom. And she was on the iBank fundraiser, the Centennial Committee, the Panzer Award Committee. She's lived in Missoula for 24 years, chairperson, Republican headquarters, served on the YWCA board, Missoula County chairperson for Stan Stevens for governor, 88. Missoula County chairperson Mark Roscoe for governor, and so forth. And But before we get to our last finalist, who's Ed Jasmine of Big Fork, Montana, I did want to comment, and as I said to the governor in my letter suggesting that these interviews should be open to the public on this Saturday, because we need to know what people are thinking about these matters. But in my letter to the governor, I asked, do you consider your interviews as secret? I'm shifting to my letter to the governor now, asking that the meetings be open to the public. Do you consider your interviews as secret and not open to the public? Or is it just segments of the interview for which either the finalists or yourself would declare that portion as not open to the public, or is the entire interview open to the public and the press? If the finalists said to you that they would like the interviews to be public, would you concur? If you do intend to keep these interviews secret, on what law are you relying? And I was wondering if you or any of your staff had made any specific contact with the Native American community in seeking applicants, for example, from Salish Kootenai College, one of America's, has a growing reputation nationally as one of the best Native American community colleges in the nation. But I said to the governor again in my letter, I want to go back in time a little. At what point and in what ways did you announce the expected vacancy on the regents and your interest in receiving applications? For example, there is a letter from one of the finalists, the one we're coming to, written back in October and asking for consideration for the regent's seat. And I asked the governor, do you think finalists should make any financial disclosure? Most specifically, financial disclosure which could involve any potential conflict of interest vis-a-vis the regents. And yesterday, I say to the governor, referring to when I was up there on Monday, because I wrote this letter Tuesday and faxed it, yesterday, meaning on Monday, the governor, described the interview process as structured. Now, I have some familiarity with the term, but could you more fully describe what structured means in this case? For example, is every question predetermined, and are all the finalists then asked the same precise questions? And will you distribute the text of the structured interview questions prior to Saturday's scheduled interviews, or is this too considered confidential and unavailable to the public and the press? Would you appoint a candidate who, in the 1996 general election, had supported the abolition of the regents on that particular ballot question? And do you expect to ask the finalists their views on the legal argument between the regents and the State Lands Board? And did you only receive a total of 7 applications? So that was my fax to the governor. The fourth and final candidate for the regents, again, I'm sorry, I'm very disappointed that there, 7 applicants for this important position is just a disgrace. I just, we'd have more applicants than 7 if this position had really, it almost seems as if, it's a very controlled situation. So this is from Ed Jasmine in Big Fork, Eagle Bend Drive, his letter to the governor. He was a banker from 1959 to 1993, primarily with Norwest Investment Management and Trust and their bank in Helena, of which he was the president. And then he was vice president of Norwest Bank Great Falls and vice president Seattle Trust and Savings Bank, etc., etc. He's been active with the Glacier Orchestra, treasurer, Eagle Bend Homeowners Association, University of Montana Alumni House of Delegates, St. Catherine's Parish Finance Council, Western Montana Catholic Foundation, chairman of the Carroll College Board of Trustees, etc., etc. Trade mission, governor's 1983 trade mission to Japan and Taiwan, Rotary Club of Helena. He was born in Helena and served 2 years in the United States Army, graduated the U of M in 1959 in business administration. His letter to the governor. Dear Mark, thank you for your letter of October the 8th. So I don't know whether that indicates that the governor was writing to candidates or potential candidates that he was particularly interested in hearing from as early as last October. Pardon me, excuse me, I'm stumbling here a little bit today. Dear Mark, thank you for your letter of October the 8th. Bobby and I assume that's his wife, are both pleased to help with your very successful campaign. I am not sure how the voters will respond to Constitutional Amendment number 30 and what the future holds for the Board of Regents, but I would be interested in replacing Kermit Schwanke on the board when his term expires next February. I'm a graduate of U of M, currently serve on the President's Advisory Council. As you know, I was on Carroll's board for 12 years and also served 2 terms on the Helena School Board. I would be happy to furnish you with a complete resume outlining my 34 years in banking and other activities if you are interested. Now, his reference to CA 30, which was the amendment which, if it had passed, would have abolished the regents. I don't know, from his letter, we don't know whether he supported that amendment or opposed it.
What about his reference to helping with the campaign?
That Bobby and I are both pleased to help you with your very successful campaign?
Yes.
Well, I assume that they were helping with the campaign, whether that meant money and or volunteer labor, I don't know. I mean, it is true that all 4 here are Republicans, so...
Do they sign an affidavit saying that? Are we sure we're not getting a Democrat this time?
I don't have a clue.
Well, Mac, I'd like to hear you comment a little bit on these cover letters. I myself am very interested in the science of cover letter. I mean, it seems to me that Jeanette McKee, who wrote, I would say, the most thoughtful letter, is talking about what the governor is terribly interested in right now. Today and tomorrow. You know, Ernest Ratsburg basically referred to his wife's educational experience and his various relatives going through the college system. Arlene Broom seems to be a hard worker and serves on a lot of committees. I mean, I'm talking about both the resume and the letter. But I think Ed's going to get it. Looks to me like Ed's going to get it.
You mean the banker from Big Fork?
The banker for Big Fork.
Well, I mean, I'll respond to that, your comments in 2 ways. One, you're right. I mean, Jeanette McKee's letter talks about education and what she sees as the future, you know, is holding for the Board of Regents, and you know, so she's the only one of these 4 that has taken the time to be specific about. I mean, you know, it could always go on, but she's the only one of the 4 that's talked about education. Nobody else has. So, isn't that what it's about, or is it about money so again, that's why it gets back to, you know, why I think the meeting should be in public, so that we can hear the governor ask them what their views are on education, and I hope that we see the press moving quickly, because in the next 2 days to demand that this meeting be open to the public. Granted, if they have some personal matters that they need to discuss behind closed doors, then fine. I mean, I realize that happens sometimes in, well, ordinary employment situations sometimes, or a union dispute or whatever. But for the most part, I mean, why should there be any secret about what 4 people think about, you know, higher education in Montana? But I think the whole process stinks on dry ice. I mean, you know, from the beginning.
Have you heard from the governor's office? I mean, they've had your letter since Tuesday. Today's Thursday.
No, there's been no response from the governor, and you know, maybe he's checking with his attorney. But is his attorney the Attorney General? I don't know. But I mean, like I say right here, I mean, we don't need to pick it up on camera, but I did, fax the Great Falls Tribune and the Associated Press, and stopped personally into Missoula, and I said, we have to, as colleagues together in the news business, we have to, maybe a court would say to us, no, he's perfectly entitled to, keep that meeting closed to the public. But I want to know, and I want to know what law he's relying on if he says that he's going to keep the meetings confidential. I mean, we're supposed to know. I mean, I thought that was the essential, I had to spend...
Maybe the assumption here is that since we have nothing to say about it, we don't deserve to know.
Well, I think that's a good way of looking at it. Just briefly, I want to call attention, as I have in the past, and I want to belabor this because, or we can come back to it if we have time. It's like I had to send a 4-page detailed letter under the Freedom of Information laws in Montana, just to find out questions about the governor's Blue Ribbons Telecommunications Task Force. And when I met the governor on Monday, he, in his courteous way, suggested, he said, I said, well, I've also left you a letter requesting information about your telecommunications task force, and which I'll get to in a minute. And he made some pleasant response that indicated, well, your contributions were, welcome and, contributed, a great deal. And I looked at the governor in astonishment, because I have never been, to the governor's Blue Ribbons Telecommunications Task Force meetings. Nobody that I know ever heard about when they were taking place or where they were taking place. Missoula Community Access Television, I checked with the director down there the other day, Randy Ammon, and said, did you ever get a notice of a meeting of the governor's Blue Ribbons No? So, so who hears about these meetings? These, and do you buy your way in? I did get this financial data from my letter of request for information is extensive. Is this how you get a seat at the table of the governor's Blue Ribbons Telecommunications Task Force? By like if you were AT&T donating $16,000 to this task force? Or if you were donating $31,550 from US West to the business of this task force? Or if you were Montana Cable Television Association, which essentially is TCI, donating $7,500 to the task force? Is that how you get a seat at the table? I didn't donate any money. MCAT didn't donate any money to the... so this is what we got. What we wound up with is a bill affecting essentially telephone companies. In other words, this task force was set up 2 years ago. They were supposed to get a federal grant of $100,000, which didn't come through. So when I was up in Helena, 2 weeks ago, and went to this hearing on a so-called bill that resulted from these expenditures of monies by the telephone companies. That's what it was. So the original bill 2 years ago from the last session, which set this thing up, the scope was supposed to be very wide, right? Where's that book which everybody's seen before anyway? Connecting Montana to the world. Connecting Montana to the world. This is the result of these expenditures, right? And Montana is hardly connected east to west or north to south, and they're
by roads.
By roads, and the University of Montana can't even connect up their programming to the educational channel that we designed here in Missoula for them to put out their materials on. This is ridiculous. So I've got another 4-page letter, under Freedom of Information, asking for information about these donations, and it's it's frustrating. If I have a hard time, as nosy as I am, and as persistent as I am, and as my mother used to say, you're like a dog with a rat, you won't let go. and she wasn't always being complimentary. But if I have a hard time getting information, what is the ordinary citizen? I mean, who's trying to keep up with it? What do they get? They get nothing. So let's see. Blue Ribbon. Pay attention to that Blue Ribbon Telecommunications Task Force. Only.
Let's talk about the interview on your show last week with Vicky Cottrell. She's the minority leader.
House Minority Leader from Missoula, Democrat. Yeah.
Well, I just thought her comment on the governor was rather pithy.
Help me out. I mean, I know what you're talking about.
In essence, she said that the more popular you become, the more you protect your popularity. The more you protect your popularity, the less a leader you are.
That's good. That's a good encapsulation of what she did have to say. And that conversation in that interview arose out of the fact that, this legislature, which I don't hesitate to call, as others have called, that there was a group of organizations meeting here in Missoula the other night from all around the state. This is an extremist legislature. It's crazy. And we'll get to some of the craziness here in a few minutes. And we'll get real specific about it. But Vicky Cottrell, when she, kind of made that description of the governor's position, it was in response to my question. I said, well, because she said the governor's budget itself did include like these monies for Head Start, and that she said it's a good budget. But that he's not going out and fighting for it. He's not going and advocating with his own party. He's not coming in here and helping out with the budget that he envisioned. So that corresponds with what you just described in her comments. Is, you can hold a flag up high and pretend that you're really carrying it, but if you're not carrying it into the advancing troops, then you're not really carrying it at all. And and so you're very popular because you haven't offended anybody. I mean, wasn't that some of the gist of it?
Yeah, I think what we finally settled on was that good leaders make people take sides.
Right. And then that came out of the domestic household, I think.
Yes.
Say it again.
Good leaders make people take sides.
Good leaders make people take sides. Thank you. All right, hang in here. We got a little ways to go yet. Just a little bit about that. One last thing about the governor's Blue Ribbon Telecommunications Task Force. Before it existed formally by law 2 years ago, it had a prior incarnation, right? As the Conrad Burns Roscoe Telecommunications Task Force. And who did the governor appoint as head of this task force on telecommunications? The public relations executive from Plum Creek. This is
Oh my God.
This is 3 years ago. Now what's the PR man from Plum Creek Timber, got to do with telecommunications? I mean, that's one that I heard about, because that goes back about 3 or 4 years. I go to Helena trying to find that meeting. Where is that meeting being held? Behind locked doors at U.S. West headquarters in Helena. There's security guards at the front door. I go up to the door. I said, "Hi, I'm decently dressed, and I was sober." And I said, I was reaching for the door to go in. They said, "Well, where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to go to a public meeting." Well, blah blah blah. But I got in. But I mean, what happened again? What happened? I have enough chutzpah to say I'm going in. There's a meeting inside there, and I want to get in there and go to it. And but most people, you back away, because I mean, if you see security guards standing at a door. Let's get back to some open meetings.
Here.
Plum Creek, and I said this on our free speech show on MCAT the other night. Don't forget, everybody, we got our Monday night 6:30. We've got you're welcome to come down to MCAT. Just on Spruce Street, right up from Higgins in the old Missoulian building, and it's your night to say whatever you want to say about anybody or anything. It's the First Amendment show, and you don't need an appointment, and you don't need to call ahead. It starts at 6:30. It runs till 10 minutes to 7 right before City Council, so you got 20 minutes, and so come on down and speak your piece. Here's something that I did. Sherry Devlin of the Missoulian, thanks Sherry for catching us up with this, talks about, we're talking now about this phony land deal, you know, going back to what, the New World Mine over by Yellowstone, is that what it was called, yeah. Right, New World Mine. All of a sudden the deals start coming down. Clinton says, oh, well, we'll trade, you know, you buildings in Washington and forests here and hot springs there, and you know, and we'll trade you off, you know, and then the governor then waits a few weeks or whatever, and he announces, well, we'll sell off Montana land and we'll trade with Plum Creek, and you know, like it's going by like the Space Challenger, like it's going so fast. I don't know what's going on here. What the hell is going on?
Are we obliged to give away Montana? I thought this was a federal deal. Does anyone know?
You know, we need some serious daily. We need some hardcore. We need some congressional hearings in Montana now. Let me recall Senator Tom Walsh from Montana, one of Montana's great senators, right? He had been appointed by FDR. I'm watching, keep my eye on the time. I think we got about 20 minutes left, or 25. That's because I'm talking so fast. Senator Tom Walsh, among many things that he accomplished for this nation, as well as for the people of Montana, he broke open the Teapot Dome scandal, the one down in Wyoming where the oil reserves, which really belong to the United States. And he broke that open because he saw it happening. I want a United States Senator from Montana or anywhere that is going to break open this scandal just like Tom Walsh did in the 1920s. He's still in the history books for finding out about that. This business about Plum Creek and trading this and that is for the birds. It's rotten. It stinks. And let's hear from Senator Burns, and let's hear from Senator Baucus, and let's get some congressional hearings out here.
Hear, hear.
And let's hear somebody calling for them. Here, anyway, let's see. At the urging of Governor Roscoe, this is from Sherry Devlin's article, at the urging of Governor Roscoe, Plum Creek has identified 57,000 acres of national forest timberland that it would willingly buy. Yeah, I bet. Let's see here. I'm looking for a first name because there was this Bob Lucas, who is president of the Upland Bird Association. He spent his career as a researcher for the United States Forest Service and said he, quote, understands why the executive officers of Plum Creek would try to exploit the buyout of the New World Mine. Continuing word for word from Mr. Lucas, what really baffles me is why the governor jumped in, enthusiastically supporting them on a proposal that has terrible precedent. In my career with the Forest Service, we worked on a lot of mutually beneficial land trades, but we never treated the national forest like so much real estate. And then Ira Holt, treasurer of the Ravalli County Fish and Wildlife Association, said the original proposal was to trade urban and former Department of Defense property for the gold reserves, not to trade one environmental disaster for another. And then Bill Corrigan of the Polson Outdoors Club, all U.S. citizens own public land. It should require a vote of the American people to sell any of it. It can't just be sold to the first company that offers the Treasury some money. Some good words. Now let's give people a clue here, because on Wednesday, next Wednesday, February 19th, from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. in the Boone and Crockett Club in Missoula. That's the old Milwaukee Road station right beneath the Higgins Street Bridge. There's going to be at least a 3-hour meeting hosted by the Lolo National Forest. They're having 3 open houses for the public. So the other 2 are in Frenchtown on Wednesday, also on Wednesday in Frenchtown, and on Thursday in Alberton. But on this coming Wednesday, February 19, 6:30 to 9:30, public meeting on this whole crapola hosted by the Lolo National Forest. If you want to get your 2 cents worth. But what I want to see, aside from, like MCAT, as most people know, is, except for the 2.5 people who staff it and administer it and keep it, running and keep the books open and the doors open, is an entirely volunteer organization. But this business of public hearings on these lands and Plum Creek timber and this rotten deal, if this was happening on a national level, you'd hear, local KUFM saying, well, we're cutting into our regularly scheduled broadcast to bring you live these hearings from the nation's capital because it's that important. And when will I hear, or any of us hear from public broadcasting, whether that's television, public television in Montana or public radio in Montana, to say, yes, this is important, and we're going to carry it because it's that important. There's a whole series of specialists on China coming in for the Mike Mansfield series. Once again, we could see them plugged into the cable system on the channel that we set up. The city of Missoula, when we wrote the franchise and set aside that channel for education, and in 6 years the University of Montana has used it, I think, a total of maybe 3 times or 4. And here we have these speakers, which taxpayer dollars are paying for, coming in on the Mike Mansfield series. Most of Missoula won't be able to get to see them because the University of Montana will not take the trouble to open the switch and get the camera out there and let these speakers be held by everybody. And I probably, everybody who reads the Missoulian saw Ken Toole's piece on the electric companies. Ken Toole works on an energy policy for the Montana Environmental Information Center, and he talks about a Valentine's Day gift. There's an industry bill in the legislature, and contains some valentines for some special friends, like an exemption from some of its provisions for, quote, a customer this is the way legislators do it. When they never name a company, right, that's going to benefit. They just write the language so it fits the one company that they want to receive the benefit. It's a great piece, right, that Ken Toole wrote. He says, so it provides an exemption from some of its provisions. This is like a deregulation bill on the utilities. For a, quote, a customer engaged in an electrolytic reduction process with an installed capacity in excess of 75 MW, close quote. And Toole goes on to write, they should have just said Columbia Falls Aluminum Company, because that's who this exemption is for. Another provision in the bill exempts, quote, new public utility loads greater than 75 MW, close quote. Who gets this Valentine? The new ASME silicon plant in Butte. That's who. Here's another special interest gift from the electric industry. For the electric industry, Toole writes. One section of the bill says, a public utility currently doing business in Montana as part of a single integrated multi-state operation, no portion of which lies within the basin of the Columbia River, may defer its compliance with this section of the law. Toole says, seems like an awful long way to describe the Montana Dakota Utility Company. Good work, Ken Toole. This legislature is out of control, And I wanted to take, we've got time yet, got a little bit of time. I wanted to take a note to 2 things. I have, I have, like everybody else, when you go to hell and it's exhausting. And by the good fortune of my having spent a couple of years in the United States Coast Guard when I was a young kid in my teens, I had you know, like all vets, I do get some medical benefits, and it certainly saved my body on a lot of occasions, and so I'm able to get some, you know, I have a doctor at Fort Harrison in Helena, and after seeing the governor and raising a little hell, and I went to see my doctor at Fort Harrison, and got some help. But that's unimportant. But I wanted to call attention to 3 Coast Guardsmen who lost their lives off the coast of Washington State within the last 2 days, and they operate these special craft 44-footers that have been around for as long, you know, that's what we had when I was in the Coast Guard, gosh, you know, almost 40 years ago. It was 40 years ago. But they're special self-righting craft. So they're designed so that when they go out in terribly rough seas on their rescue operations, you're strapped into the boat, and it actually can tip over and then right itself. And some of you may have seen, you know, a segment on the national news yesterday describing how it's very, very dangerous work. Fortunately, I was never assigned to it. I was a radio operator in the Coast Guard. But a lot of bravery, and hats off to the Coast Guard and the work that they do, which is often overlooked as we worry about the Air Force and the missiles and the Navy and the Army and all of the, you know, horror stories that they get involved in. I'm very proud of the United States Coast Guard and its protection of life and property at sea, and thanks to those 3 men who lost their lives trying to rescue some people off of Cape Disappointment, a terrible place where the Columbia River meets the Pacific Ocean. I just wanted to say that. Thank you. And let's see, we have some more, we have some wonderful stuff from that wonderful legislator, Senator Casey Emerson, the Republican from Bozeman. Now, refresh me. He's the one with Big Bertha, the paddle. I mean,
yes, as I recall, he's been outed as a child beater.
Well, there were letters that came from former students. He wanted to introduce a bill, for allowing corporal punishment in the public schools.
Spanking on the bare buttocks.
Spanking on the bare.
Which struck me as extremely perverse.
A little bit weird.
You know, I mean, you know, let's not just humiliate them. Let's take their pants down and really humiliate them.
I was hoping that maybe he would give a demonstration in Helena, and that he would bend over and take the spanking from Big Bertha.
To show that it didn't hurt.
Well, to show that maybe that it worked, that he would be a better boy. You know, if he took his spanking on the bare buttocks like a good boy, and then he wouldn't be doing other crazy things out there. What now? This is again.
This is a Lulu.
Yeah. Let's see. He wants. Patience, please, out there in TV land as I catch up here. Senator Emerson of Bozeman said that some government, police, and court officials across Montana have engaged in criminal conspiracies involving fraud, bribery, drug dealing, and even murder, according to Senator Casey Emerson. And so he wants to set up an inspector generalship, right, that would kind of be able to oversee everything that was causing people difficulty. And actually, I will take an aside from now. I'll come back to Emerson. But you know, we do read about and see on the news and read on the news that there are such things like in the various departments, like the Department of the U.S. Treasury has an Inspector General, and the Department of the Army has an Inspector General, and the Department of Commerce has an Inspector General. And their job is to keep everybody's nose clean. You know, they're kind of an ombudsperson for that agency or department in the U.S. government. and they are isolated, you know, from the rest of the whole workings of that department, so that they're free to, you know, find out who's doing what and if anything wrong is going on. So I think of my own and other journalists' frustration and citizen frustration in Montana sometimes when you're trying to get information and you get blocked from that information, and there is a person that I would like to be, you know, or an office that I would like to go to, be able to go to, and say, geez, I'm having a hard time getting information here. Could you help me out? Actually, there's, I think, a budding outfit. I stopped in to visit with this office. I saw their name on the door, the Montana Consensus Council. Now, maybe they're trying to do some of this. I don't know. But back to Emerson. So Emerson wants to set up this, you know, inspector generalship, which would be under the supervision of 2 House members and a senator, and it would be a mechanism to begin impeachment proceedings when official wrongdoing is found. The inspector general also could investigate wrongdoing by members of the public. So, I mean, in other words, this is like Joe McCarthy in the 50s. He could do anything to anybody at any time, and so it's crazy.
For no reason.
So it's another craziness of this Emerson guy from Bozeman. I don't know if he's a first-termer, but Bozeman ought to get on the recall mode and get this guy out of town.
An embarrassment, to be sure.
He's an embarrassment. But listen, Russell Hill of the Montana Trial Lawyers Association, I mean, I can't believe they even took testimony on this bill. But anyway, Russell Hill of the Montana Trial Lawyers Association testified and said he understands people's frustrations because big corporations and the powerful are able to use the law and the system to their own advantage, while the ordinary person often has no recourse. This is an Associated Press article out of Helena. But Hill went on to say, there is a conspiracy out there, but it is a conspiracy of complexity. If you're rich enough to be able to pay a lobbyist or a lawyer by the hour, you can come in and work the heck out of the system. If you're an ordinary person, you can't navigate it. So this was his response. You know, he was opposed to Emerson's idea, but he's also agreeing that you know, as I've been, you know, moaning and groaning for the past 45 minutes, it's very difficult to break into the system and get information and participate in your own governance. Then on gambling, Keating, Senator Tom Keating wants to abolish the Montana lottery. Keating said the lottery was touted as a means of raising money for schools and reducing property taxes, but that has not happened. Instead, Keating said, all of the money has been diverted to the Treasury. And Ellen Engstead of the anti-gambling group called Don't Gamble With Our Future said the Montana lottery spends 3.6% of its money on advertising, more than any other state-run lottery. Now, I did some math. I didn't do it to the exact quotient, but that means that in Montana, they're spending over $1 million on advertising, radio, television, and print newspapers and magazines. So that's who's making the money. We're paying out $1 million. So don't forget, folks, when you see an ad for the lottery on television, or hear it on radio, or see it in the newspaper, you're the one who's buying the advertisement. If you like that idea and you're happy to pay for it, fine. But it's tax dollars, lottery dollars that are, you know, the newspapers and the broadcasters are delighted with that income. And I would suggest that each media outlet in the state of Montana reveal what they garner in revenue from the state for all kinds of advertising, whether it's lottery or all the, you know, legal advertisements that you see. I want to know what they're making. And there's that. And in about 2 weeks' time. I don't have the date yet, but we'll have a 2-hour program on MCAT called Community Conversations, and this was from the meeting that we were at the other night here in Missoula, in which it was organized by the Montana Human Rights Network, Montana NARAL, that's the National Abortion Rights Action League, the Montana Women's Lobby, and PRIDE, the organization devoted to protecting and expanding the rights. I don't know what rights gays, lesbians, and bisexuals have in Montana now anyway, but they're devoted to protecting and expanding rights. Of course, there is a case before the Montana Supreme Court, which should be coming down for a decision soon. But anyway, it was an interesting and provocative 2-hour meeting, stimulating. It'll be on MCAT in a couple of weeks. We'll give you that date soon. And I think that's it for life under the Copper Dome as viewed from home in Missoula. And I am the news junkie, and yes, I do get up under the Copper Dome. And do I have to show the news junkie logo?
Sure.
So it's the news junkie McCarthy Coyle under the Copper Dome and at home here in Missoula. And our program is produced and edited at MCAT, that's Missoula Community Access Television. Great facility. And the show is produced by Coyle, Haran, and Jimerson. Thanks for watching. Keep your nose clean. Keep your ears wide open. Call the free 800 number, 800-332-2272. That's 1-800-332-2272. And they'll put you through to the governor's office. Leave him a message.
And keep your shoulder to the wheel.
See ya.